Good evening. I call this session to order. We have a quorum. Tonight we will begin at 6 p.m. with our workshop session. We're going to take the workshop a little out of order. If you don't mind, we're going to have our Director of Finance, David Erb, to conduct a PowerPoint presentation regarding the American Rescue Plan overview. And then that'll feed into our discussion on the status of our major capital projects.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. I am happy to present some background information and overview of the American Rescue Plan. The city was very fortunate to receive quite a large sum of money as part of that stimulus package. So I'm going to provide a little background of how that came about, how we have opportunities to use different funds in different areas, and then turn it over to some questions that you might have. So just a real quick overview of my discussion today. I'm going to talk about the American Rescue Plan provisions, the city's allocation, and the general spending categories that we can utilize those funds in. Some allowable uses, specifically uses to support low income in areas within qualified census tracts, and also for infrastructure improvements to include water, sewer, and broadband. Got some budget and reporting timelines that I just want to point out, and then offer some next steps and other considerations. The American Rescue Plan was signed into law March 11th. From there, the Treasury had 60 days to provide guidelines for the recipient cities, states, counties, and other members to be able to start then acting on those funds. The total amount of the stimulus was $1.9 trillion. Of that, the cities and states were allocated $350 billion. This is the first of all the stimulus packages that actually provided stimulus money directly to cities for use. All the others were allocated through a county or to be used by the private sector. The ARP, or the American Rescue Plan, is also known as the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. So you maybe hear me going back and forth between ARP and fiscal recovery, but they're basically one and the same. This is a nice graphic that was provided to me by Chris McGinn, and I think it illustrates where that $1.9 trillion is being allocated. The largest portion of that is actually direct payments to individual families, but that second largest there, the $350 billion, that is the portion that's going to be coming to state and local governments. For the city's allocation is $19.54 million. Of that, the city's already received June 1st, $9.77 million. The second half is expected to come to us no sooner than 12 months from the time of the first payment. So we can expect June of 22 is when we will receive the next allocation of that funds. The allowable uses, there are 4 broad categories, and within each of these categories, there are some subcategories that we've actually over the last couple of months have really dove down into and how we might be able to use those funds. But the first is to respond to or mitigate the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic or the negative economic impacts that resulted from. That is very similar to how we were able to use the CARES monies that were provided to the city last year. But it also has a component there that is intended to support those that were impacted economically. Another category is premium pay for essential workers. The third category is replace lost revenue, and those monies would be used. There's a broad latitude for the use of those monies, and they're to provide general governmental services, and I'll dive into that a little bit more later in my presentation. And the last category are investments in the water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Now, the timing of when we need to obligate or encumber those funds and when we have to fully expend those funds, there's 2 different dates. It doesn't matter that we're receiving some of the funds this year and some of the funds next year. We need to fully obligate those funds by December 31st of 24. and total spend done by December 31st, 26. So I think there's some urgency there to get some projects that we have slated or potentially could be slated for these funds to get them moving forward. The first category, I'll just provide a little bit more detail. Supporting the public health response. Again, these are some of the same uses that we had from the CARES monies, mitigate the impact from the pandemic. We can use them for medical expenses, also behavioral health care, public health resources. We can use them to retrofit the city facilities, PPE purchases and the like. So again, very similar to what we found from the CARES funding. An additional use would be addressing the negative impact from the pandemic. This is assistance to individuals and households where we actually have the direct ability to provide that support rather than going through the county or another mechanism there. We can provide some small business support. We can use it to recover impacted industries such as tourism. And then we can also use those funds to rehire public sector staff that might have been removed as a result of the pandemic. Again, there's a wide range of options for providing assistance in each of these categories. Serving the hardest hit communities, I think, was a focus of the American Rescue Plan, and intended uses or the spirit of the stimulus is to provide support for those that were hardest hit by the pandemic. That would include low-income families and communities of color. Those demographics have been disproportionately impacted, and you can see that language over and over and throughout the American Rescue Plan, the interim final report. Again, using those funds for health disparities, investing in households and neighborhoods, addressing educational disparities, and providing or promoting healthy childhood environments. And they specifically mention that there's a broad latitude of use of funds when they're directly supporting qualified census tracts or folks that are served within a qualified census tract. The category B is providing premium pay for essential workers. There were specific groups that were identified in the plan as essential workers, and some examples would be staffing at nursing homes, workers at food preparation facilities, grocery stores, and the like, and public health and safety staff. These are funds that we could provide payments directly to the employee or through grants to private employers. So if there were some private businesses out there that we chose to support, that we would be able to provide that to them. The emphasis was to prioritize premium pay for the lower income workers. Those, again, that probably were more greatly impacted by the pandemic than others. And then this is interesting. It's a retrospective application. So you can actually apply funds for essential workers that were classified going back to last March. And language in the interim final rule says that it's both permitted and encouraged use of these funds. Category C is replacing lost public sector revenues. The use of the fiscal recovery funds are intended to provide a continuing of essential services for the city. Now, I'll explain in a second here, but the Treasury has developed a standard methodology on how to compute the lost revenues. What's interesting is the city actually didn't see a loss in revenue from year to year, but there's an implied loss that absent the pandemic, our revenues would have grown quicker or more than what they did. So there's a calculation that determines that. So they call that counteractual revenue. So we're utilizing here a GFOA template, the Government Finance Officers Association, and we're incorporating the Treasury standards. So we feel that it's a very secure calculation method that we're using. So there's not going to be a fear at a later time where the Treasury may pull back funds because we may have over calculated our revenue loss. In fact, I think we've gone the other way and we've calculated it very conservatively. Even with that, the calculation indicates that the city has lost $11.65 million. Now, that's not an actual loss. That's a comparison of what our actual revenues were versus what the Treasury said we might have expected we would have received absent the pandemic. There's a presumption that any loss in revenue is due to the COVID-19 health emergency. So regardless of the loss in revenue, it's going to be presumed to be as due to that. Again, there's a broad latitude of use, and you'll see that spread out through the whole interim final report, is that there's a broad latitude of use as long as you're meeting the spirit of the stimulus, which is to provide support for those that were most impacted. And this last bullet point shows that just that wide range of use services can include but are not limited to the maintenance of infrastructure or pay-go funding, building new infrastructure, roads, included in that, modernization of cybersecurity, and a number of other things. So again, they don't tie you down to a specific use, and they give each of the local jurisdictions some flexibility in how they manage those funds. This is just a quick example of the revenue loss calculation, and there are certain steps that we took. We determined what our base year revenue was, and as far as the ARP guidance is concerned, that's for fiscal year 2019. We determined a growth rate that we've seen in our city revenues over the last 3 years, and we've come up with a 3-year average. We apply that to our base year revenues, and that then becomes that counterfactual revenue that I had mentioned. So that is what they're saying that we would have received had it not been for the pandemic. We determined what our actual revenues were for 2020, and that's where we come up with that difference in revenue. That table on the right shows that process step by step, and there's actually some pretty good detail behind this that roll up to these numbers. But you can see that reduction in revenue at the bottom is $11.65 million that we can use towards general providing governmental services. Moving out to category D, this is an investment in the various infrastructures, water and sewer and broadband. It's presumed that projects that are aligned with EPA clean water and drinking water would also be eligible uses of these funds for our water and sewer projects. So there's a number of drinking water and wastewater projects that seem to fit in some of the capital programs that we have currently. Investing in broadband, again, the intent is to remedy shortfalls in access to universal, high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband services that's directly out of the interim final rule. They want to make sure that the additional services that are provided by this broadband goes to unserved or underserved communities. It's that last mile connection from the main network into the household. They've got some standards there for the services that need to be provided. The intent is to provide assistance to households to promote digital literacy, and also use of those funds to modernization or modernize our own internal cybersecurity. Just some budget and reporting timelines. Today we're making this initial presentation to council. We've got some recommendations that would be discussed as part of the fiscal year 22 budget, and further discussion will be held at that budget workshop in August 7th. Reporting timelines with the Treasury, we've got an interim report that's due August 31st and quarterly reports beginning October 31st and every quarter thereafter. There is a comment period. So right now what's out there with the Treasury is the interim final rule, and they've provided a 60-day window for folks to review the rule and ask questions, get further clarification on uses of those funds. And we have until July 16th to submit any questions we might have. Over 400 questions have been submitted to the Treasury portal to date. So some of the questions that we had have already been asked by the Treasury or asked of the Treasury, and they're going to include responses in their final rule after July 16th and that comment period is ended. Another consideration would be, how do we use those funds? Do we use them in coordination with other fiscal recovery fund recipients, such as the state of Texas, Denton County, and city of Denton? Is there a way that we can do something in collaboration with those agencies, or we can prevent from duplicating efforts? So there's not a lot of information that's out there from those agencies yet. I know there's a special session of the Texas legislature a little bit later this fall. So we don't know exactly how they're going to utilize those funds. But anyway, some other considerations. The city of Denton put out actually a citizen survey to see how best or how the residents might feel the best use of those funds would be. We haven't seen the results of that yet. We're just going to inquire of those and then bring those back here for discussion. And then any other considerations as a result of the final rule. If there's any final changes to the guidance between now and when those final rules come out, those are other considerations we'd have to make as far as how we might be able to use those funds. So that's quick and dirty of the ARP. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So Mayor and Council, one thing that we've learned as we've gone through this COVID situation, we've learned that as the government provides these programs, then the actual administration tends to evolve over time. So we have these preliminary guidelines. So we've been evaluating them. I can't tell you that there won't be further clarification as there was with the CARES Act. Certainly some of these options that they've given us are ones that I think would be difficult for the city to administer. And so what we've looked at mainly would be the use of these funds in relation to infrastructure, certainly for impacted areas of our city. And we're going to walk you through that as we talk about the capital projects and some of the shortfalls we have with those capital projects. We also want to look at some broadband issues, which we'll be talking with you about at the budget workshop, and some additional ideas about some of our social service agencies, some things that we may be able to do there. So those are the options, but today we will walk through some of the street projects where I think you could use the dollars. And certainly I think you're all aware of the needs we've got for our water system and sewer system expansion program. So certainly I think we'll be able to give you some options on how to use this money as we move forward. And we'll talk about it in more detail at the budget workshop. But we wanted to give you the capital projects tonight, to look at. But I wanted to do the overview first so you would have a general feeling or understanding about how these funds can be used. With that, we'll answer any questions.
I have a question. So I know that the rules may change and we may not know exactly what we can do, but one of the first thoughts that I had was about the broadband. So I'm excited to see that maybe, I'm assuming we're talking about doing additional public Wi-Fi hotspots or whatever, which I'm very excited about. I also had a thought about, it doesn't say specifically parks, but it does mention that we can use the money in, there's a little more freedom to use the money within areas that are of low income. So I was just wondering, and you may not know the answer to this, could we use this to help push forward some of our 10-minute to a walk to a park initiatives in, particularly in the park that we were talking about with the triangle, and or other areas that are underserved in the community? Is that something that would be an eligible project?
That's something that I think we would want to pursue and look at. That would be park infrastructure. And I just jumped on Dave before I allowed him to answer, but I think that would be a little bit questionable, but I'll let you answer that, Dave.
Right. There's certain allowable uses when you're addressing services in a qualified census tract. So in those terms, we can take a look at that. But as far as parks, it's not clearly identified. But again, we're going to wait to see what that final rule has, and we may learn a little bit more.
Or even if we were able to get land where we could double it as a hotspot, a Wi-Fi hotspot area, and maybe pay for any park components through a separate fund. Just a thought.
Yeah, certainly connectivity in the parks, I think, would be allowable. Areas that we would set up as hotspots, maybe we'd want to pursue that.
Okay.
I have a question. It sounds like right now we have this gap, if you will, in funding on the public services building and some of our other
Street
public
projects.
safety buildings and streets and stuff like that, just because simply construction costs are crazy. And it sounds like we would be able to utilize some of this to fill in those gaps. Is that so?
Yeah, that's correct. That loss of revenue
Yes.
allows us to use that 11 million
Right.
to fill in some of those gaps.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to talk with you about tonight.
Great.
Exactly.
Questions? Well, it sounds like we're starting to drift towards the first conversation, which is the status of major capital projects.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate the input. And we'll move on to the work session discussion on the status of major capital projects. And it looks like City Manager Barron will be kicking this off. And it looks like we've also got Mr. Marvin, Ms. Anaya, and Mr. Selman available to PowerPoint us.
So council, what we want to do tonight is give you a status, an update on all of our capital projects. So we'll walk you through each one of them. In particular, we're going to point out where we do have shortages. That's in large because of the inflationary factors that we're dealing with now, especially in the area of the streets project. So with that, Stacy's going to take the first stab at it, and she'll walk you through the parks projects.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Park fans, council members. Just going to walk you through some of the projects we've got going on with the Parks and Recreation Department. We'll start with our plans. We've got the Lake Park Master Plan. At the City Council retreat, we briefed y'all about how we were looking to expand the previous scope, which was just the day use area and the RV campground area, to include the marina, and look for a partner to help us redevelop that area and make that area all that it can be, and create some continuity between the two parts of Lake Park, and hopefully some continuity so that people who are using the marina can enjoy the park, and the people using the park know that they have access to the marina if they would like to. We're working with Half Associates on this master plan, and so we put the original scope on hold until we could expand the scope of their PSA to include the marina. And we've also brought PPV, that's Chris Squadra. He's helped us with the schedule and the budget portion of Thrive, and has been real successful. I think working with Keith on some other projects and us as well. So we've brought that team together, and we are going to write an this should actually be an RFQ to identify that developer, and that will be going out in the next month or two, so that we can start planning both of those areas together. As you may be aware, we have $7.7 million in funding for the design and construction of the day use and RV campground areas, and those were sold in the GO bonds in June earlier. So we're moving forward on that. We're also want to let y'all know that we had brought an agenda item to y'all several months ago. We're looking to apply for a grant to help us do a three-pronged master plan that included parks, trails, and a tree canopy plan. Well, we didn't get the grant, and I was a little disappointed about that, but we were able to scrub the budget and find areas that we have existing funds to cover all three of those areas, and to cover the aggressive community engagement that we wanted to do with that. So if you'll remember, we had a master plan update in 2018, and by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department standards, we have to have a new one in place by March of 2023. Regardless if Castle Hills is annexed or not. So we need to start that process. And with a three-pronged approach to the plan, it's going to take us a while to get there. And so what we will do is, regardless of what's happening with Castle Hills, is we're going to have them give us input on how that plan should be updated, so that if it happens by agreement, we've got them moving through right now. But if it takes an election, we're already know that what they need in place. So if the election is successful, we're not behind the eight ball of getting the plan ready for the March 2023 date. one of the cool things I do want to mention about that, we're going to be working with the University of North Texas on doing air quality monitoring throughout the community to determine where we will need to increase our tree canopy to help with the urban heat islands and diminish shade zones. So they'll be working with LISD to do some of that. They'll also be doing health intercept surveys to judge people's perception of how they their health is impacted by their access to parks. So those are the plans that we're going to be working on. And then what we've got in design right now, Councilmember Green, you mentioned the 10-minute walk to a park initiative. And if you'll remember, after the Urban Land Institute study, we were able to accelerate the timing for the Timber Creek Trail extension east of Central Park to Corporate Drive. So we've just recently signed a PSA with the TBG partners to help us put together a design for that trail extension. And we're excited about that because that's really going to help the residents of the Triangle be connected with the existing park system that exists now. So we're excited about that. We'll be bringing, as we get through the design, we'll be bringing the discussion to the Parks Board and the City Council about a name for the trail extension. Though, if you'll remember, during the wayfinding signage development, our consultants gave us some recommendation that because Timber Creek is there's so many segments of it, it can get confusing for people, and we may need to not call that Timber Creek Trail and bring some other ideas for you. We're also looking at the neighborhood park design and development. If you remember, we just picked up with the purchase of the piece of property that is between Kia Drive and La Quinta Inn off of Southwest Parkway to develop as a park there in the Triangle. We're working with Kimley Horn to do that. We estimate that the project will take about $3 million to not only design, but to build. And what we're gearing up for is another Texas Parks and Wildlife Department local grant to help us with that. We got $500,000 for the Thrive Nature Park to develop. They increased that amount to $750,000 for this next round of grant funds. So we're excited about that. Right now, what we're doing is we're going out to each of the apartment complexes with our Play Louisville on Wheels team, and they are taking input from the residents in that immediate area of what they need from an open space there. And then on September 18th, we'll have another movement on the parkway to make sure that we've heard them correctly and say, this is what our concept is. The next week on City Council will bring the approval to apply for that Texas Parks and Wildlife Department grant and then move towards construction there. With the Hedrick House concept plan. So shortly after we met with City Council back in November, we started working with BRS, and we brought Chris Squadra and PPV on to help us kind of look over that budget and estimate that BRS had given us. Unfortunately, this is one of those projects that we're stumbling on the escalation prices. It's for construction. So we're working with Chris and BRS to really look at what our concept is and how we can value engineer getting to what we brought y'all in November. Keith and his team are going to do a demolition contract so that we can kind of get in there and find out what hidden gems might be behind some of the walls so that we're not surprised during construction and can design that correctly. And what you'll see is every year when we go through the budget, the 4B, we have planned uses of our 4B money for one-time projects. And so there's about 1.6 million slated and scheduled in the 4B projects for next fiscal year to cover the gap on this project. With the Herring Recreation Center remodel, we've been working on a two-pronged approach. We've been doing gym updates. The bottom picture there shows we've improved the floors and all the sound materials in the back gym. And we're about to pour a new sports court in the front gym to make that facility viable for rental income and to help us with balance some of the usage. Thrive's really inundated with gym use, and we'll have these available for us. So we've made those updates, but we're also remodeling the classrooms to serve as the Park and Recreation Department administrative offices. And we're working with KSA on that design to make that happen. We're hoping to move into construction in October with that so that we can open up room in the annex for all the other departments there that we're all kind of like squeezed together, and we can have some room there. Green Ribbon Project. These are two areas along I-35 and Business 121 that we are going to make the medians and intersections there look a little bit more substantial and reflect the landscaping and type of flora and fauna that you see in Leela. There'll be large trees and native plantings that go in those two intersections. This is a grant from TxDOT, and we'll be letting that project this month and moving to a notice to proceed by August. There's some strict deadlines that we have to meet for the completion of this project. So I think it'll be neat because this will really help with the identity focal points in these areas. People will know they're coming into Louisville. So then with construction, we're at the tail end, or it's just the beginning of the Valley Ridge Trail, which will complete the off-street trail portion of the DCTA A-Tray Rail Trail, so that for the entire 19 miles, you don't have to ride on the street. We are able to design this through our GEO bonds for trails, but also the DCTA TRIP funds are going to fund the construction there. We just issued the notice to proceed today, had our pre-construction meeting. So they'll start, and hopefully we'll be done in the next 6 months there. And then Garden Ridge, we're at the very tail end of the trail construction process. So if you'll remember, we had some ponding issues down by LL Woods area of the median where the grading wasn't correct when they installed the trail. So we've been working with them and getting that regraded and draining properly. And then the wayfinding signage, we're bidding it this month and then installed in the fall. So the trail itself is open, people are using it, but then we'll install the signage so that new people who might be new to town or not aware of the trail system know how to get around it. Thrive Nature Park, we're almost done there. We had some grading issues after the heavy rains that we're addressing right now. Bernd is also addressing some of the TDLR issues that were pointed out during our inspection. So they closed out that project in June. We tried to close out that project by the end of June. The Texas Parks and Wildlife project manager visited the site on June 17th, and he said it was one of the most unique places he had been in the state this year because of Thrive Recreation Center across the street being heavily developed, but the feel of the center and then walking across the street and being in what felt like Leela. He said it was one of the most unique experiences he'd had in his inspections for the year. So we were pretty stoked about that. So we'll celebrate that park being finished when we do the Thrive Plus One event on August 28th. We didn't get to have a grand opening, so we'll get to celebrate both of them. And then the future phases of that park, you'll remember we've been pretty progressive in what the ultimate design is. We've talked about having a canopy level hammock so that you can feel like you're a bird up above the little creek that runs through there. And then we have a nature-based playground planned out there. And to get to both of those being done, that'll be about $10 to $12 million. And so that will be just when that's available for us to go to that next phase. But the park's complete. You don't feel like you're lacking much when you're there now. So we're pretty excited about it. And then things that we've got in the hopper, we've got small in-house projects. The Highlands Park playground, which is underneath the electrical transfer lines going in just off of Garden Ridge, going towards Highland Village. The electric company asked us to remove that playground just so that it's not underneath the lines. They are trying to get all departments who have structures that cause people to gather under their lines to have them removed. So we've removed that. We don't know if we'll be able to replace the playground because of the lack of space or level space in that area, but we're going to make sure that when we are doing plow deployments out there, that we're engaging the residents to find out if they need something there. Because, you know, as a as a neighborhood matures and the kids mature, we might not need to put a playground back out there. We might need fitness equipment or something that we can use that's a little bit different. At Ralden Park, we're replacing the playground. If you've been out at Ralden Park, you know that the small playground and the large playground were in two separate spaces. And the smaller kids' playground was in an area that flooded a lot, so we removed it, and we're installing a new one up near the 5 to 12-year-old playground. If you're a parent, it just helps if those two structures are in the same place, and then we can open up that area that had the old playground just to be for open play. We'll also look at some adding tree canopy there, putting some trees in. The Fox Creek Bridge, which is on the trail that's close to Central Park, there's some bridges on there's some boards on that bridge that need to be replaced. So we'll be using our funding left in our $300,000 each year for improvements for that. And on the horizon, you'll remember that when we passed the wayfinding signage program, we had Railroad Park as one of them, and we'll be going into bids for that replacement soon. The interpretive signs at Leela, we're almost done with that design, and we should be moving into installation in the fall. And that's for signs that are on the trail in each of the parking lots. And then we'll move to signage out on 121 eventually to make sure people know what that big green area is as they're driving quickly on 121. And then we're working with DCTA to identify trip funds to design the southern extension of the A-Train rail trail down to Carrollton and Capel. And it looks like we're going to get TxDOT funding to build that, CARES funding for that. And so that will take us to our southern border, and we're hoping that we can convince Carrollton to design and build up to our point as well. And then the other thing that we need to let you know is, and we'll talk more extensively about this during the budget process, but we're looking to make a conversion of the Old Town Aquatic Facility to a splash pad. Not only will that help us have a more efficient use of our water and our resources there, but y'all know the difficulty that we had hiring lifeguards this summer. Imagine what difficulty it would have been if we had to open 2 aquatic facilities with what we've been struggling with there. So we think that we'll be able to provide an aquatic experience that can run a longer season, but will also be a better use of resources. So we'll talk to you a little bit about that during the budget process. And I know that was a lot, and that's the end of my section. So I'll ask for any questions.
No questions, but I would like to talk to you about the Lake Park piece that we're working on as you're doing the master plan, to see if we can get some kind of trail that is closer to the lake, just as something for folks to walk on, because I've been getting complaints like, we don't have any lake access. We don't have any lake access. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's the case, but I think that would connect the Lake Park area to other areas and give folks a place, a nice serene walk, even though this is kind of more of a pond to me because I'm from Chicago and Lake Michigan is more of an ocean. But that use of the waterway, I think the core will be for it, but it's not really taking up any space. But just something, maybe we can create a tree canopy there, so in the summer months people may be able to walk it without burning to death. So
okay.
And I'll talk to you some more because
Sure.
It's just I'm throwing a ton of you at you at the last second.
Right. No.
That's what we're
More
here for.
trails, more trees. I got it.
I don't have any questions, but I do have some comments on the Old Town Aquatic Facility. This is great. I think this has been a long time coming. For the last 5 years, this is the main facility I've used when I do have a young grandbaby, but when my granddaughter was younger. And the vast majority, I'd say 90% at any given time at this park were preschool and infants and stuff. And so this is great. I like that idea.
Yeah, that was my experience when my kids got to middle school. They wanted to hang out at Sun Valley. They didn't want to go.
And I don't even see that many elementary kids, older elementary kids. They're a lot younger.
Yeah.
So this is awesome.
Thank you. All right.
Other questions? All right, I think we'll move on to the public services. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, water and sewer fans. Public services update here real quick.
I am a fan, just so you know.
Just like Stacey, we've got this in planned and then under design and in construction. We're not going to go over every project that we have in the hopper. There are a number of them, but we'll hit the highlights here. Annex remodel. I think you heard Stacey talk about the Fred hearing. We are out of space on the first floor of the annex and actually on the second floor of the annex too. That second floor issue is going to be addressed with the public safety facility, but the first floor ITS is really crowded in there. And so once we move the parks admin folks across the parking lot over to Fred Herring, we'll open up some space, and we've got a well thought out plan, I believe, to renovate that first floor, create a lot more space, make it more usable for ITS, as well as honoring the needs of the court folks in there as well. This project is funded. The design piece is funded. The construction is not yet funded. We are estimating about $3.5 million to build this. We do believe that there may be some funding available that we could move over here on some other projects, and we'll see how those pan out. But the plan on this is that once Stacey and her team start construction on that Fred Herring piece, we will go ahead and begin the design of this renovation on the annex. We obviously can't do the construction until they're vacated from the space. So once they're done with Fred Herring and they're able to move in there, we will begin the construction. So next step for us is selecting an architect for the design. Moving on, you saw us at the retreat in February. Presented on the wastewater treatment plant master plan. We're really beginning to identify those next projects in that plan. And the first one is the electrical improvements project. So this is the first project coming out of that. This project is funded right at $4.5 million. There's actually a PSA scheduled for next Monday night for the design contract with HDR to begin the process of that. And this is really the most critical piece that was identified in that master plan. And here's a drawing kind of showing where the improvements are, and it's all manner of electrical improvements, transformers, switchgear, motor control centers, and that sort of thing. Upgrades that will not only handle the facilities we have out there, but then prepare us for those future expansion facilities as well. Project number 2 out there is actually the first capacity improvement. So that was just electrical. This is an aeration basin capacity improvement. This one has a price tag of $40 million. So this is a big project. Our next step on this is essentially to select a design consultant. We won't do that until next calendar year, 2022. In the meantime, we are accumulating funding to be able to construct that $40 million project. So again, the second most critical piece. This is that part where we talk about that 75-90 rule, where we've exceeded 75% of the rated plant capacity on our average flow. Once we hit 90, we need to be under construction on this. So we're expecting to have that full funding in place by 2024 to be able to begin this construction project. Again, a photograph kind of showing where that basin will go. The circular pieces there in the middle, kind of where that bottom left of the square is, that's the old plant 3 that we mentioned, that trickling filter that may be the last one in the state in operation. That will be removed as part of this project as well. And then that third piece is a disinfection improvement, which is that third project coming out of that master plan. Right now, we use chlorine gas to disinfect that wastewater stream, and then we have to use sulfur dioxide to remove the chlorine and before we discharge it back into the creek. This process, UV disinfection, will eliminate the reliance on those chemicals, those gases. We've got about 21-ton containers of chlorine gas down there at the plant. We would love to have less than that down there, and this would allow us to do that. We would still keep some for emergency use if we had a problem with that UV disinfection. We'd still have to disinfect, but we wouldn't use it daily like we do today. Lower right square, on the right is where that chlorine contact basin is. And then on the left part of that white square is where the UV disinfection process would go on that plant facility. Back real quick, the design on that would begin in 2024 and construction following that aeration basin expansion beginning in 2026. Moving off of the wastewater treatment plant, we do have a small project here. It's a bioscrubber. It's a odor control station that needs to be installed up at FM 407 in McGee. There's a picture of an example station there. This will be built on property that's actually going to be dedicated by the developer of that parcel. And so we're just simply waiting for that development to move forward so that property dedication can take place. This project is funded. We do have the design consultant on board. We will have to do a new PSA with them. They did a study for us several years ago at this point. They've made all of the recommendations. We would go back to them for the design and construction documents, but we would have to bring a PSA forward once that property is dedicated. Now going into some that are under detailed design, this public services equipment shed, fairly small project. It was funded actually in 2019, and then the funding was, we did the design, we were ready to bid, and the funding was put on hold when COVID hit. At mid-year, we actually were giving that money back, and so that project is, we're working with purchasing to get that project out to bid. It's simply a structure to cover we've got a lot of equipment down there. We've exceeded the capacity of the shed that you see in the picture. So we'll simply be building another one of those at the Stephen L. Backus Public Services Center. The Fleet Facilities Maintenance Facility, we've talked a lot about that. That is on here. That is a total project budget right now of $22 million, $25,000, just over $22 million. 17 of which is certificates of obligation, 4.575 utility fund revenue bonds, and then some utility fund cash. That project we presented last meeting and approved that first amendment to purchase the steel in advance. We're working on the bidding right now for what would be the second amendment to this construction manager at risk project. So moving along here. Expect to be back in September on this project with that second amendment and move forward with construction thereafter. City Hall basement remodel. This is one that has been on the books for some time. I presented earlier this year a couple of options on that. And it's essentially taking the unfinished basement downstairs and creating conference and meeting space that would free up some of the space here on the upper floors, create an opportunity for a little bit of event, a little bit of training space, some conference space, and some flexible space. You will see a PSA on this, a design PSA, probably in August to move forward. I sent that to Liz earlier today for review. Estimated construction on this is $2.5 million. Project is funded at 3.2. So this is a place where we might have a little bit of extra money that can be moved to another project that may be short on funding. And then there's the layout that was presented earlier this year. The training space on the right, conference and flex space in the middle, and then reserving some area on the left that would be storage for now, regulated storage, but could be expanded for additional conference space later on. Whippoorwill lift station improvements. This is one that actually has been a few different projects. We've been making steady improvements on that lift station. The remaining pieces are some electrical improvements. It's been designed. We're short about $250,000 on this utility funded project. We likely can find that elsewhere in the CIP to be able to fund this project and move forward. This will be done. There's a series of projects that affect this lift station, the odor control station I showed earlier, and then we also have a project that is rehabbing the force main coming out of that. That force main is oversized, so we will be slip lining or lining that that force main as a rehab method. We'll likely do several of those projects at one time just to be in that area and be done and get out. So we do have some projects under construction. So HVAC, we were at Midyear allocated some additional funding that had not been allocated earlier in the year. That brought us to a total annual allocation this year of a little over $1 million. These projects are ongoing right now. They are projects that are being done out of that funding, about $200,000, $205,000 in HVAC upgrades across the city. Also coming out of that funding, some roof restoration projects. This is being done by our facilities group. The Annex, this roof has a few leaks to it. It's 32 years old and needs to be replaced. So that project is going to be $305,000. And then also the water treatment plant administration building roof is a little over 20 years and in need of rehab. We actually hired a drone service to go out and fly these, which PD called me in the middle of the night about that one. We weren't very communicative on that, but we did the work. We identified the problems, and now we're going to start on those rehab projects. So $175,000 on that water treatment plant roof. Fighting Farmer Tower, this is another one that we've talked a lot about. We are beginning the process of removing that tower from the system and demolishing the tower. Total budget on that's $150,000. We're going to do a PSA with the Burkhoff consulting firm. That went to Liz this morning. It's under $50,000, so that will only be need the city manager's approval. We are slating to be able to remove this as early as December of this year. Of course, we'll coordinate that with David's utility relocation project in advance of I-35. So. Also on our annual allocation for maintenance projects, this is projects G1602 through G1607, various pay-as-you-go maintenance projects. This is where we pay for the street and alley panel replacements, sidewalk replacements, ADA improvements, curb and gutter improvements, sidewalk improvements, limited amounts of alley improvements. Again, total project allocation this year was $4.65 million. Including almost 1.9 that was allocated at Midyear. A lot of that work is underway on College Parkway between Valley and 35, Corporate Drive, and Summit between Main Street and Valley Ridge. The water system master plan, this master planning process is wrapping up. Again, we presented that at retreat. This was a comprehensive study of both our distribution system as well as the future of the water treatment plant, our future sources of water. And then they are also working as part of this, developing what we're calling an Econ H2O tool. It's an improved planning tool for our capital project planning on the utility side. We expect to roll that out later on this year and very likely present that at a workshop where you can see the real value of that tool and how all of these capital projects on the utility side interact with one another. So we're excited about wrapping this up and moving forward with some improvements on the water system as well. Here's one that's wrapping up, the waterline replacement on the south side of the dam. You may recall that the Corps of Engineers had to do some improvements to their dam. And in order to do that, they asked us to move our 2 raw water lines that deliver untreated water from Lake Louisville to our treatment plant. So we actually partnered with the Corps. They hired the contractor to move those 2 lines. We gave them a check for about $7.2 million. That project, well, I guess the 7.2 was the total. The check to the Corps was 6.6. That project is wrapping up. Our lines are complete. We're taking water through both lines at this point. So just some punch list items on the contractor and then some remaining items on the Corps' project for that project to close out. Vista Ridge Lift Station, another one that we've got under construction, $5.6 million project budget on that. That project was awarded by council June 1st of 2020, Red River Construction. They should be wrapping up this project later this fall. And we've got a couple of pictures of the work that they're doing out there. Pretty big hole in the ground. And then they did have to add to the building. We're adding a rake room and an odor control station that will, one, remove solids before they get into the force main, and then two, deal with some odor issues that we've had, not only at the station, but more down along the force main and where that force main goes to gravity, right under the George Bush Turnpike and the Sam Rayburn area. We've had odor complaints over the years from that area. And then I believe the last project I have on here is the meter changeout project. We're still plugging away on that. We've completed 4 years or we're in our fourth year. I guess we've got 3 years remaining. We've changed out a little over 10,000 meters at this point, and we're continuing to fund that at $720,000 a year. Anticipate completion in the next 3 years. The contractor that's doing it is able to change out 100 to 200 meters per day in those residential neighborhoods. So that's pretty good progress. We've expended the funds for this budget year. We'll start up again in the fall when we get the next allocation. So, and I would be happy to answer any questions on what I've presented.
I've got some questions. The bioscrubber at McGee and 407, how far does that take in place? Where the smell is at?
So that is generally in that area of Summit, probably from, it doesn't quite go down to Main Street. It's pulling from midway between, I guess, 407 and Main Street, all the way up to where that force main lets out, actually just on the north side of 407. So there's a section in there. It actually makes a turn and goes down around Grandy's Lane. It makes a turn and goes towards the highway. And so really from that area north to probably 500 yards north of 407 is where it goes to gravity.
Okay, there's a pretty pronounceable smell on 407, or sorry, on McGee and right there near
right at the intersection.
McGee and the gas main right there.
Yeah, this should cover that area. It's drawing a vacuum on that whole gravity section, and it should take care of that whole area.
Okay. Is there a better drawing of the basement remodel?
I'm sorry, is there what?
A better drawing of the basement remodel? That drawing's a little fuzzy.
Yeah, the ones that we presented in PowerPoint last time were actually better than this one. We certainly can get you. So in the presentation that I made earlier this year, we had not only the layout, but we had the finishes and stuff too. So I can get you those as well.
Okay. And the roof restoration, what does that entail?
In these cases, at those dollar amounts, that's stripping everything off, probably including the deck, or at least areas where the deck is
all the way down to the deck, the whole roof.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And then we'll apply what do you call it, elastomeric, surface on it. So.
Okay. And the dam, is that when? Do you know when the whole completion of that's scheduled to be complete with everything?
Well, so this is project 1 of 3. So this is the only one that has significant city investment in it, right? So this project should be complete, I would think, later on this year. Project number 2 is the spillway area up off of that road over there, East Hill Park Road. And that project's going to take 2 years probably. And then they have their restoration contract. So they'll come back in and they'll do remediation, plantings, all of that stuff. So it's three projects, and it was total about 5 years. So this one's been 2, that one's 2, and then that last one is about 1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? You don't know how excited I am about the UV treatment. I'm just saying. I mean, water fan here.
So this UV is down at wastewater. The ozone that you're excited about is on our water plant.
Well, that in the ozone, yeah, I know that's on the process, but the UV is going to be great. Get rid of the chemicals there, and then I need ozonation is the next thing. But that's just
getting those chemicals out of our plant down there would be nice. So.
Appreciate the update. Thank you.
If there's no more questions, David is next.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor. I've got quite a few slides to cover this evening, a lot of projects, so I'm going to be running through them pretty quickly, but I'll try to hit the highlights and then point out the projects where we have some funding shortages. We've got a couple of projects that are planned. We haven't started them yet, but we're getting close. The first one is North Cowan Avenue, and then associated with that is a 42-inch water main replacement. We typically wouldn't put those two projects together, but given the fact that they're one's right on top of the other, it makes sense to do it that way. North Cowan's, this piece of North Cowan is the piece that was closed off back when we built Valley Ridge, and so now it's a cul-de-sac. And at that time, we promised that neighborhood that we would make upgrades to that street at some point. So here we are at that point where we're going to start the design. And you should be seeing a professional services agreement relatively quickly with regard to beginning that design work. This is one of those projects where we've got quite a large funding gap. As I scroll through these slides, you'll see on the funding needs, some of the numbers or some of the costs have G's, D's, and U's after them. And that's general fund, drainage utility, and then utility funding.
So David, I don't think the microphone's picking up your voice very well. If you could move it a little closer. Thank you.
Another project we have started, or haven't quite started yet, but we will be, is a Ace Lane sidewalk. And this project is a little bit underfunded, but it's a relatively small project. And so we'll be probably looking for $15,000 ultimately to build this in addition to what we've already got. And this project will be designed with at the same time as we're doing the water line on Ace Lane, which I'll cover later. And again, we'll have a PSA coming to a council meeting in the near future. Projects in design. First one up is Valley Parkway and Civic Circle. This is another one of those projects that has a significant funding gap. The project is really going to replace, for the most part, what's already out there in terms of the street. We will be making some ADA pedestrian improvements while we're out there, and we are going to be replacing some of the utility lines. The next project is our Mackenzie-Hembry project. This project is well, it started out a little bit larger than it is now, but because of the inflation issues, we had to cut back on the number of streets we were doing. So we're doing the main streets through the subdivision. Even at that, we are a little bit short on the funding. The project is pretty much completely designed. We're at the point now where we're obtaining right-of-way. We've obtained some of the right-of-way. I can tell you that on this project, it's very likely we will have a property condemnation. So with that, figuring that in, it's hard to say when we're going to be able to start construction because we obviously don't want to bid it till we have all of our right-of-way sewn up. West College Street, we're in the same boat here with regard to the project being designed. We're at a point now where we're still obtaining right-of-way. We started out with 12 parcels. We've got 4 parcels remaining. We're having a little bit of difficulty with one property owner, and we're desperately trying to appease them so that we can avoid condemnation. And we're just a little bit short on the utility funding on this project. East College Street, this project is funded with RTR funds. The design of the street is going to be very similar to our Main and Mill project in terms of street design. It's going to have the parallel parking, the bike lanes, street furniture, extra wide sidewalks and lighting, and landscaping. We're a little bit over $1 million short based on our estimates. We really just kicked off the design. We're hoping to have 30% schematic plans in September, at which point we'll start gathering public input. I-35 aesthetics. We're at about a 60% design, and we're desperately trying to wrap the design up on that project so that we can deliver the plans to TxDOT so they can in turn incorporate those plans into theirs. We're quite a bit short on funding here, a little bit over $5 million. And we'll have to, obviously we've got a little bit of time, but once TxDOT gives us a funding agreement, then they're gonna have to pretty quickly execute that funding agreement. So we'll talk about that funding toward the end of the slide presentation. 2017 traffic signals, we've got 3 locations with this project. 2 of them are on this map. One is at Magic Mantle and Old Denton Road. The other signal on this map is Huffines Boulevard and Business 121. The 3rd location is replacing the signal at FM 407 in Summit, replacing it with a permanent mast arm signal rather than the temporary signal that's been there for some time. Going back to the funding, I think at this point we are fully funded, and the exciting news is that we should be opening construction bids on this this coming Thursday. Holford's Prairie Road project. This is a project that's almost completely designed. It's Holford's Prairie Road from the extension of Corporate Drive northward to Business 121. It's going to be a 37-foot wide street, very similar to Midway Road. This project is particularly difficult in the fact that we are having to reroute the roadway alignment somewhat, especially over Midway Branch Creek. Also, there are some very large right-of-way needs on this project. As a matter of fact, we expect that we'll be purchasing 7 parcels on Oak Tree Lane. And the main reason for that is because the road elevation is going to be so much higher than it is now to get over the floodplain, that there is no reasonable way to provide access for some of those lots on Oak Tree Lane. They're close to Holford's Prairie Road. Of course, some of those lots are occupied, and so this will involve resident relocation, which is entirely added dimension. On the construction side, we're almost $1 million short of funding, and I kind of put an asterisk on that because until we really get into the right-of-way and the resident relocation issues, it's really hard to tell where the costs on this are going to go. And of course, that's going to affect the construction timeline significantly. Corporate Drive segments 2 through 4. This is sort of the centerpiece of Corporate Drive from Railroad Street to Holford's Prairie Road, including the bridge over the Trinity River. This project also has resident relocation on it. There is a rent house on Holford's Prairie Road. As a matter of fact, right in the alignment of the roadway. So that means we will have to purchase the home and relocate those residents. And because of that, I can't give you a solid timeline on construction. What that does to us, we originally envisioned building these 3 segments together, but we may have to separate them out because of the timing. As you can see, we've got a very large funding gap on this project. Some of it we've got money either from Denton County or additional RTR funds to fill. But it still does leave us a little bit over $3 million short. Segment 5, Corporate Drive, that's the piece in Carrollton. We're fully funded on this one. Unfortunately, the drainage on this piece is kind of involved with the Segment 4 where we've got the property relocation. So that one may be delayed as well until we can work through those issues. And then last but not least is our railroad underpass on Windhaven. Segment 6 of Corporate Drive. This project appears to be fully funded. With any luck, we should be advertising for bids on this project in the August-September timeframe. We have our South Keeley project. Again, this project fortunately appears to be fully funded at this time. The design is nearly complete and we're just starting the right-of-way acquisition. The North Mill Street project, again, the design is all but complete, and we're really hoping to bid this later this summer, and it appears to be fully funded. Northwest Old Town Streets, we've had a couple of false starts on this project. We started out designing concrete streets with curb and gutter. That very quickly became way too expensive, and so about a year or so ago, the city council directed staff to reduce the scope. We're mainly going to be focusing on utility line relocation and drainage. And then we'll come back and do a full depth asphalt overlay or mill and overlay on this project. Most of the complaints in this neighborhood really have been related to standing water, mosquitoes, and some minor flooding. Our Elm Street and Poydras and South Alley project. We're at 70% design. The funding is a little bit short, and we're hoping to bid it later in the fall. Now we have deleted part of the alley. The segment of alley west of Poydras has been deleted from the project because of some property owner issues and some uncertainty with regard to redevelopment of that property on that side of Poydras. We have our Levee Improvement District Trail. The design is complete. This includes 2 pedestrian bridges over the ponds down there in the Levee District. This is near the Hilton Garden Inn. We're at a point where we've got 2 property owners we're negotiating with for easements with, and so we're trying to work through those issues now. Once we have the easements, then we can bid this. Jones North Keeley reconstruction. This project is 80% funded with a FLAP grant, which is a federal, it's federal money. And this project is actually being administered by the Federal Highway Administration. It's kind of nice. We don't have a lot of control necessarily over the design or as much as we would like, but they've been fairly accommodating. But the nice thing is with this project is that they do all the work and really we just do the review and then pay our 20%. And we're looking at a construction timeline sometime in late 21, 22. They're at 70% design. Now we'll get into our projects.
Hey, David. I think, can you go back to page 51 right quick before you get too far, and let's catch Indian Oaks. I think it might have skipped over that. Yeah, there it was, 51. There you go.
I'm sorry, yeah, we missed Indian Oaks, so that's in design. The consultant is working on 30% plans, and we hope to have those next month. And once we have those 30% plans, we'll be visiting with that neighborhood, probably a Zoom format like we've done on Timberbrook. It seems to work well for those types of meetings. We seem to get a lot more participation. I've had a lot of questions in this neighborhood. You know, this project is limited to the streets and the utilities under those streets, very little. We're not putting sidewalks out there. We're not putting in curb and gutter because they don't have them now, but we are replacing the asphalt pavement with the concrete because we have such a bad soils out there. And there's been a lot of issues with streets failing. So we are going back with concrete, but we're not really doing a lot of drainage and certainly no sidewalks. We're getting a lot of comment. There's a lot of misinformation in that neighborhood with regard to whether or not we were doing sidewalks. We're trying to head some of that off at the pass, but hopefully we'll be able to clear that up when we have our neighborhood meeting. Now we're getting into our utility and drainage projects. The first is a drainage project. It's a relatively small project. This Old Town drainage relocation is basically taking a box culvert there near the northwest corner of Purnell and Mill Street. And we're routing it around the perimeter of the property. This is a property that's proposed for a multifamily development. And so in order for that to happen, this drainage conduit needs to be moved. The existing one is shown in green and the new alignment is the red. I mentioned the Ace Lane sidewalk earlier. This is the Ace Lane 12-inch water main. And this project, again, relatively small. But it's an important project because it does complete a water line loop, which is important for fire protection. This particular project, we have the design funding, but the construction funding is not in place yet. Prairie Creek Interceptor Sewer, you may recall a few meetings ago, we did our resolution that allows us to start obtaining easements and right-of-way for this project. The design is all but completed, and we're in the middle of obtaining right-of-way. We're a little bit short on the funding on this project, about $200,000. Timber Creek Aerial Sewer Crossings Phase 2. This project replaces 9 aerial sanitary sewer crossings over Timber Creek, although we've recently added one more crossing over Fox Creek that we discovered had some problems. We're about $1.2 million short on funding, and we'll cover that later. I-35 utility relocation. This project is for us to move our city utilities, water and sewer, out of the way of the proposed expansion of I-35. And of course, it's in the area of the 3 interchanges that are being rebuild, that being Main Street, Business 121, and Corporate Drive. We're on a fast track here. TxDOT is proposing to start construction on these interchanges sometime in 2022, which means that we have to have our utilities cleared before they even bid those projects. So that kind of pushes our time frame quite a bit. So we're at about the 60% design phase right now. We're hoping to have 90% plans in September, and then we're hoping to bid this project sometime in either December, January, sometime in that time frame, so that we can be under construction by March. And then we'll have to have a relatively short construction time in order to be out of the way in time for TxDOT. The bad news is that this is for the most part, an unfunded project. As a matter of fact, we met with our consultants today, and it looks like this is going to be about an $11 million project. And so when we get to the end of the slide presentation, there's some we'll be talking about the shortages, but yeah, this is a big one. And of course, we don't really have a whole lot of choice with it. So Timber Creek Interceptor Sewer, this project is interesting in that we are going to try to do this for the most part with trenchless technology rather than open cut. It's replacing it's repairing and replacing the major trunk sewer that runs down Timber Creek all the way from Business 121 downstream all the way to the Timber Creek lift station, which is over on Railroad Street. So it kind of goes through Triangle area and then across through Waters Ridge. At this point, the project appears to be fully funded. The design is complete. We've got several temporary construction easements we need to obtain, so we're working on that. Now, projects that are under construction. We have Timberbrook subdivision. The construction is roughly 55% complete. The contractor is currently working on Mockingbird and Hollyoak. They intend to have Hollyoak completed sometime around late September. The next street they'll move to is Red Wing. And then after Red Wing, they'll probably go and finish up what's remaining on Magnolia. We're holding the contractor on this project, working on 2 streets at a time. Some of the problems we've had on this project on the construction side were created by allowing the contractor to work on more streets at the beginning of the project than they were really capable of doing, and we didn't understand that until they got into it. So at this point, we're keeping them from being on more than 2 streets, and it seems to be working much smoother. Our Midway Road project is almost complete. In fact, we really expect to be substantially complete on Midway Road by the end of this month. We're fully funded here, even including the change orders that we had to do on this project. If any of you have been out there, it really looks a lot different out there today than it did just a couple of years ago. Our Main and Mill Street project is actually completed. We're working on making the final payment now, and hopefully within the next week or 2, we'll be sending an acceptance letter to the contractor. Utility projects under construction. We have our 24-inch water main that runs along Business 121 from Valley Ridge to the Midway Pump Station. This project is all but completed other than some last minute punch list items, and there's a few erosion issues that we need to correct out here before we accept the project. And again, even including change orders, we've been fully funded. Our Timber Creek erosion repair, this is the segment of Timber Creek that's over by Kinney Court. It's almost complete. We should be done within the next month or 2. And the contractor is really just finishing up some minor stuff. Now, with this project, we also did some improvements to Fish Hatchery Road Bridge. We've got a little bit of an issue out there in that that bridge has been gated off. The cost to repair that bridge is somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. And the bridge has been gated off. We've talked to the Corps about moving the gate so that the public has access and maybe some parking up there. They've indicated that at least for the time being, they're not really interested in discussing that. Possibly after their dam repair is completed. But we're kind of at a point where we're trying to decide whether we really want to spend $500,000 on a bridge that the public can't use. So we're still working through those issues, but that is actually part of this project. Here's a before and after photos of the bend right there by Kinney Court. You can see what it looked like previously. It was a very soft, shaly limestone that just sort of sloughed off every time it rained. And we've had the people that live out there really seem to like it, and they've liked the contractor we've had. So this has really been a good project. We've just started construction on the next piece of Timber Creek, which is adjacent to Central Park. Some of you may recall that this is the location where a year or two ago we had a large diameter sanitary sewer that had been exposed in the bank of the creek and was in danger of falling into the creek. Fortunately, our public services folks were able to take care of the sewer and keep it from falling into the creek. They had to move it back away from the creek. And so now we're armoring that bend in the creek adjacent to the park. And then part of this project will also relocate the trail adjacent to the creek further back as well. And now we've kind of gotten to our summary slides. I think Gina's going to take it from here and talk about some of the funding shortages and how we're going to handle those.
So one of the first things I wanted to mention is that you'll notice that this is street funding. And I think David mentioned a couple of times that we would talk about utility or drainage, and that's not really included in this. I did want to make you aware, though, that we have $6.2 million currently unallocated in drainage funds in our CIP. So everywhere that you saw D, we actually have funding for that. We just haven't allocated it to those specific projects. And I believe David Solomon is in the process of prioritizing our list of drainage projects right now. And so that's kind of why we have a buildup of that drainage fund sitting there right now. And so we'll be allocating that in the near future when he gets that priority list. The other thing is on the utility fund side, we have a project that has $11.5 million in it right now for Midway lift station and the force main. That project is kind of a couple of years out, but we have that money sitting there. And so one of the main overages that you saw was related to that I-35 relocations. That amount of money is about $8 million that we need. We'll pre-fund that through that Midway pump station money. And then TxDOT is going to pay us back for about 80% of that. So even though that looked fairly dramatic on the utility fund side, I didn't want y'all to freak out about that $8 million that we do have that covered in a different way. Also on the utility fund side, Keith just finished the master plans for both water and wastewater. And so we're still in the process of reprioritizing some of those projects. So we have a lot of movement around on those utility projects right now. We have a miscellaneous Waterline project that has about $1 million. And so that's where we'll get some of those smaller amounts too. So just so you know that on the utility side and the drainage side. But back to the street side, you'll see that the list of all of the projects that David went over amount to about $17.6 million. Normally, we look at this all the time. We always have funding shortages. We're looking for city sources that we can use to fund that. We look for the county to help us out sometimes with their bonds. COG, the state of Texas even, sometimes we'll push through funding for these. So that's what we'll continue to do. But right now, we also have the ability to spend rescue funds, which our finance director, Dave, talked about with you earlier. We have the ability to spend $11.6 million of that 18 or 19, is it 19 million? 19 million that we're getting in rescue funds on streets or other things, as David went over all of the allocation possibilities.
So certainly, Council, it's going to be your decision on how we allocate that funding, and we'll be bringing you more options at the budget workshop. But we wanted you to see how that lost revenue category could be used to fill in our street project shortages. So Gina will walk you through that.
So one of the first things we looked at were, he talked a little bit about having to utilize that funding in areas of the town that do the most good for lower income or census tract areas that really will do the most benefit in our community. So we overlaid the CDBG spending areas in the past as well. I talked about the census tracts, and we came up with these 3 streets, the McKenzie-Hembry project, the North Cowan, and North Mill. All 3 of these projects, if you look at the total funding for the entire projects for all 3 is $11.6 million. That we actually have some funding already set aside for those projects. But if we were to put that out and just use rescue funding on it, that's clean and simple. And it frees up about $7 million of existing funding to be utilized on some of the other overages that you just heard about.
So that's that second list that you see there. The freed up money on McKinsey, North Cowan, and North Mill is $7.7 million, and we can reallocate that to I-35 Aesthetics, Holford's Prairie, Elm, East College, Jones, North Keeley. So that takes out $7 million of that overage. Unfortunately, we're still left with $6 million that we need to come up with. The Valley Parkway amount of $2.5 million is actually not needed until 22-23. So that one's not as an immediate need. We will be looking at reserves, 22-23 bond issuances, or even a county. I think they're having a bond program that we may can utilize some of their funding for that one. But the other two, we have Corporate Drive at $3.3 million and Jones North Keeley at $171,000. So the $171,000 is built into your preliminary budget that you'll see when we give it to you next Monday. You'll see that coming out of reserves for that funding. And then the $3.3 million for Corporate Drive, that's one that we're going to look at adding to the bond issuance that we do next year. Right now, we have it as a delay on Louisville Valley 4. Louisville Valley 4 actually has 3 separate years of issuances. We started this year with $1 million. Next year was supposed to be about $3 million, and I think the following years are around $8 million. So what that would do is delay that slightly. But that's what we're looking at right now. And again, we'll talk much more in depth about our capital program and the GEO bond sale and issuances coming up at the budget workshop on August 7th. But just so you know, that's kind of the thought process right now.
So, Council, I did hand you the status of our bond program. So we have 2 more sales planned, and you can see we have about a little over 21 million still for streets. And that's what Gina's talking about, that we can help cover the cost of some of these projects. Certainly that always affects other projects in the end. And then remember, one of the next steps in our overall street program would be a blue ribbon bond program or committee appointed to consider a future program for 2024.
The only other thing I might mention is that as you went through that process, you may have noticed that we are actually overfunded in a couple of projects. When you look at the Indian Oaks as well as the Timber Brook subdivision, both of those have about $2.5–3 million more than we need right now. If they continue as they are when that project is complete, if we do have that overage, we can certainly use that to free these up and not delay anything. So as you know, it's always kind of a moving target, and we do our best to kind of reallocate those as we go. So nothing ever kind of stays the same from one meeting to the next, but we do have a little flexibility there.
Well, Council, any questions?
What options do we have in picking some of these contractors for street projects? Is it all low bid, or is there any leeway?
We have leeway. I mean, I think we always look at, what is it, best value?
Best value.
Yeah, best value. So it's not only low bid, but we look at other considerations.
I think as an accountant, I think this is what we start. All the pictures are nice, but this this is what a gravy is.
If you can get him a multivariable regression on this, thank you for the clarity. I think something that we might like to see as we get closer to the end of the bond package, and I know it's on the radar, but a summary of how we've done and what we've been able to provide for residents and the timeliness of the projects as we've gone through. I know if we are looking at a blue ribbon committee, that data is going to be very important.
Will do.
And I know staff does a great job of getting this stuff out the door, so I'm sure that'll be great data. No other questions? I think we are done with our workshop. With that, we will go ahead and move into our regular session. To begin with is the invocation by Councilman Troyer, followed by the pledge to the American and Texas flags by Councilman Meredith.
Please join me in a moment of introspection and contemplation. Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and Texas Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Just a heads up, we'll be starting with, when we get to the end of the meeting tonight, we'll be starting with Councilmember Cade and working our way around the round robin. That's just giving everybody a heads up so we don't have any surprises later on. But next we have item C, which will be our public hearing. We have a public hearing to consider the Louisville Juvenile Curfew Ordinance. This is the first public hearing being held in accordance with provisions of the Local Government Code Section 370.002 in order to allow public input regarding the city's juvenile curfew ordinance adopted September 12, 1994. The City Council may abolish, continue, or modify the ordinance. The recommendation is that the City Council conduct the public hearing as set forth in the caption above. Any comments? We have a public hearing. Did we have any cards filled out or anything? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by voting. All right, motion passes 5-0. And we're going to see, we need to continue this one, right? This one's a little different in that we will continue this public hearing. So consideration of an ordinance pursuant to section 311.003, the Texas Tax Code amending tax increment. Oh, sorry, that's where I got derailed. So that one comes back next meeting because we get 2 public comments and then we will vote to either keep it or any one of those 3 items that staff put out. Item 2, continue public hearing, consideration of an ordinance pursuant to section 311.003 of the Texas Tax Code, amending tax increment reinvestment zone number 3, TERS 3, located south of State Highway 121 and Business 121 and being wholly located within the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Louisville, Texas, by amending its boundaries and its benefits to the city of Louisville and amending the project and finance plan for the zone. This ordinance amends the boundaries of TERS 3 to include park and open space land. The proposed boundaries include an additional approximate 53.05 acres generally located south of State Highway 121 and Business 121 and being wholly located within the ETJ of the city. This ordinance also amends the project and finance plan to update project costs and zone reimbursements, including the acquisition of park and open space land and to include Economic Development Authority. So the recommendation on this one is that the council continue the public hearing to the July 19th, 2021 meeting. If I could have a motion and a second.
Move to continue the public hearing to July 19th, 2021 council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Council, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Item D, Visitor Citizens Forum. At this time, any person with business before the council not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the council. No formal action can be taken on these items at this meeting. Any person wanting to speak remotely may join this meeting through Zoom by visiting, and I'm not reading the HTTPS, so it's there on the notes, or they can call in. To access e-commerce comments, you can go to the website and utilize the e-comments link. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Speakers attending the meeting remotely are asked to email their contact information for the record to the city secretary. And in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the city council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. City secretary, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do. We have one speaker that's on Zoom, a Thomas Baker.
All right. Mr. Baker, if you would please.
Hello, I'm Thomas Baker, and I serve on the board of directors for the Children's Advocacy Center for North Texas. We wanted to express our thanks to you, the city of Louisville, Mayor Gilmore, and the entire council for your financial support of the Advocacy Center and investment in our community. Advocacy centers are a place where kids can go when there has been a crime committed against them. That crime is typically sexual or severe physical abuse. Though an independent nonprofit, the Advocacy Center is mandated by the Texas Family Code to provide 6 core services to child victims of abuse, their families, and local law enforcement. We are a neutral party that coordinates the investigation and prosecution of several child abuse cases. We want to thank Chief Dever and the entire police department of Louisville for their dedication and service to the victims. We also provide mental health counseling and other services like helping with immediate needs such as food and clothing. Clients are never charged for any of the services we provide. We always rely on funding from individuals, foundations, corporations, and local governments in order to keep the doors open for kids. In 2020, 299 children living in Louisville were helped at the center. They and their family members received 5,946 direct services last year. So far, in 2021, we've seen the surge in cases as predicted by industry experts from kids being out of school. Each month is a record-breaking month, with April 2021 being our busiest month ever, with 171 forensic interviews. This number represents kids all over Denton and Wise counties and hundreds of hours of law enforcement case coordination. Child abuse, especially child sexual abuse, is associated with some of the worst possible outcomes in our communities. By giving children the support to heal from their trauma, you're restoring their potential to lead happy, productive lives. Your investment in the center is critical, and I'd like to extend my gratitude to you for your contribution in fiscal year 2019 to 2020. You are our partners in helping children heal from their trauma and to get a place where they can realize their full potential. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir. City Secretary, any additional comments?
No, sir.
All right. We will go ahead and move to the consent agenda. All the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or comment must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. Do we have any requests for removal?
No, sir, we do not.
Council?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If council would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Item F, regular hearings. Continued item, consideration of an amendment to the tax increment reinvestment zone reimbursement agreement by and among the city of Louisville, the Louisville Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone number 3, TERS 3, and Bright Realty LLC for project costs within tax increment reinvestment zone number 3, and authorization for the city manager to execute the agreement. Should the city council approve the ordinance amending the boundaries of the project and finance plan for TERS 3 as described in a previous item, staff recommends an amendment to the reimbursement agreement to provide for updated project costs and zone reimbursements, including the acquisition of park and open space land, and to outline economic development parameters. And the recommendation from staff is that the city council continue this item to the July 19th, 2021 meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to continue the hearing to July 19th, 2021 council meeting.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If council would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Item 7, consideration of a variance to the Louisville City Code, section 6103E, access management, auxiliary lanes for Sparrow Senior Living, a 10-acre parcel zoned medical district located at 1450 Valley Ridge Boulevard, requested by Joseph Farraco, Kimley Horn and Associates Incorporated on behalf of the owner. The developer has immediate plans to construct a 192-unit senior living facility on the vacant property currently owned by LISD. The developer is requesting a variance to waive the required deceleration lane at a driveway for lots that exceed 5 acres. The recommendation is that council approve the variance as set forth in the caption above, and available for questions is Mr. David Salmon, city engineer.
I have a quick question, David. In consideration of this, removing the deceleration lane, do we have any concerns about the location of this driveway where it's kind of coming around the corner? I assume staff has looked at that.
Have, and really the deceleration lane, with that corner, our biggest concern, of course, are left turns coming out of the proposed development. Right turns don't tend to be quite as important in that situation. But for the most part, when you actually look at the numbers, based on this type of use, the volume really isn't there, and the driveway is lined up with an intersection and a median opening, and there's another street across on the other side. Both of them are low volume. There's no intersection capacity issues, so using our standard, using standards that are accepted, it doesn't appear to be a problem.
Okay, so according to our standards, it really doesn't warrant a deceleration lane, other than the fact that it's over 5 acres.
Right. The existing code basically says that anything that's commercial or multifamily or industrial that it's 5 acres or larger requires a decel lane. What we're going to in the new code is a performance-based standard, based on traffic volumes. So when we have uses like this that might use 5 acres or more, but it's a relatively low traffic generator, then we wouldn't require a variance to not build that decel lane. So it's going to be more performance-based moving forward once we have a new code.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Item 8, consideration of a resolution extending the declaration of local disaster for public health emergency until 11:59 p.m. on July 19th, 2021. On February 17th, 2021, Mayor Rudy Durham, acting in accordance with authority granted to him under the City Charter and Code of Ordinances and under Section 418.108A of the Texas Government Code, declared a local state disaster for public health emergency due to concerns related to COVID-19. The disaster declaration, which the Louisville City Council subsequently ratified, supported, and continued until 11:59 p.m. on July 12th, 2021. Ongoing evaluation of circumstances related to the virus and the updated recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control and the Texas Department of State Health Services indicate that the conditions necessitating the disaster declaration have and will continue to exist for a period extending beyond July 12, 2021. It's a recommendation that Council consider the resolution as set forth in the caption. Council, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
All right. I have a motion and a second to approve. Council, if you would please vote. Motion passes 5-0. Reports. So we will round robin it, but I'm going to let staff always do theirs first, and then it'll be the different council members. So, okay, you queued up? You ready? Okay, because it'll happen right after we have staff wander through what they have for importance. Mr. Lukey?
Nothing, sir.
All that for a green light. That's pretty awesome. Some there.
No report.
Nothing extra?
Not right now.
So I think that y'all are all aware that we had an electrical surge at Thrive over the weekend, and it's compromised the indoor aquatic area operations. And I'm happy to report that with our friends from Sunbelt and our team at the at facilities and with the aquatic technicians, we've been able to get the pool open running. We'll be open for operations at Thrive tomorrow.
Great. Good news. I know a lot of people were upset and thought that was going to be a lot longer than a day or two. So well done.
We were too.
Just a quick update on the lake, Mayor. We're currently at 523.25, which is 1.25 feet over the normal pool elevation. They're still letting out 4,800 CFS, so I would expect to see that get down fairly quickly.
It's another thing that makes me happy. This is a lake level report. Thank you. Chief? Right. Chief, behind? All right. Thank you. Mr. Ferris?
No, sir.
Councilmember Cade?
Nothing really to report. I would like to say that during one of, what would you call this? Our new council orientations at Thrive. I love that place. I left after a long, long day because remember, we didn't get out until after 6. But I went and grabbed my husband and we came back to just really explore that area. It was much needed and I thoroughly enjoyed that. In the classroom areas that are built in the interior is really awesome. It would just, I would behoove all of our citizens out there just to take a day to explore Louisville and find these parks and that you've never been to before and try them out.
Thank you. Councilmember Meredith.
Yes, I have some library activities happening. We have on July 12th, the Novels at Night Book Club. That's no registration required. It's at the Crawford Meeting Room. Poetry in the Park is Tuesday, July 13th from 7 to 8. There is registration required for that at Thrive Nature Park. Something called Blackout Poetry. Morning Book Buzz, Active Adult Book Club for active adults, Wednesday, July 14th, 10 to 11 a.m. No registration required at Thrive. And the boardless game night for teens aged 13 to 18, which I love that. Wednesday, July 14th from 6:30 to 7:30 at the Bennett Program Room. And also one of my favorite events this Saturday is the Duck Derby. For those that are entered in the Duck Derby, I have it on that one of your council members will be in that event. So come out and enjoy that.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilmember Troyer.
I have a number of Louisville Grand Theater activities. In performances, we have, of course, the Sounds of Louisville on the 13th, Tuesday the 13th, featuring the Tejas Brothers. On July 20th, the Sounds of Louisville will feature Uptown Funk. And of course, both of those are Wayne Ferguson Plaza. The acoustic jam occurs every Friday night at the Grand Theater, and it's an amazing event. If you have never been there, I would definitely encourage you to show up sometime. If you don't have anything to play, you can just listen. If you want to perform with the group, just bring some gourds or something to make a noise with. So anyway, but that's every Friday night starting at 7 o'clock. Then several activities going on in the plaza. Yoga in the plaza with Blue Anju Studios. That's Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pilates in the plaza with Audrey, Thursdays at 6 p.m. And Tai Chi in the plaza with Lowell Johnson, Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. And then there are 2 art exhibitions going on. I Am Woman, an exhibition by Missy Burton, presented by the City of Louisville. That goes July 17th through August 14th. And then Fresh Ideas 2021, presented by the Visual Arts League of Louisville. And then that too is July 17th through August 14th. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Green.
Me? Okay. I just want to take a minute to commend staff of our police departments for the 4th of July fireworks show that we had last week. That was one of the most amazing fireworks shows I've ever seen. It was awesome. I was very, very proud to be in Louisville for that event. And it was the organization to get all those people in Old Town. James, do we know how many people were there? 4,000. I'm not sure. Is that the highest attended event we've ever had there? I've never seen it that packed. It was incredible to see that. Very exciting. And on that note, we are planning for Western Days. I put it on my calendar. I'm so excited. We're going to have it this year in person. And I believe we are taking vendor applications for that right now as well. So just based on what I saw at the July 4th event, Western Days is going to be out of the park this year.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
All right, so our Community Development Block Grant is working an annual action plan and they need advisory from the citizens right now. So we're looking at over $954,000 worth of funding that'll be going to different agencies. Some of it's from the Fed, some of it's from the city. Just to let you know that the document is available online and it's also available at City Hall where you can come take a look at it. There will be a public meeting on July the 20th at 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall. So make sure you participate in that and you can help us figure out where we're going to send our funding. That's all I have.
City Manager, anything?
I do not, Mayor.
All right. So I'm going to dovetail onto the Western Days comments by Councilmember Green. This morning, I had the opportunity to stop by CCA and had a lovely visit. I hadn't been over there since the pre-COVID times, and talked a little bit about what they've been able to achieve over this last year. They've distributed over $2.1 million in CARES Act funding to help keep housing. Keep people housed. So they've done a phenomenal job. The food pantry has gotten an upgraded freezer. I got to learn a little bit more about how that pantry acts as a hub for several smaller pantries within the area, which I was unaware of. So they're doing a lot of great work to push that all out. But I think most importantly, what I learned is that they are going to be putting on a 5K at the beginning of Western Days. And since I've been known to traverse a 5K every once in a while, albeit slowly, Council, I'm going to put you on notice that we're going to be doing something. We'll figure out how we can create a fundraiser for this to help out the CCA, not just the fundraiser that they're doing for the 5K, but maybe a little challenge that we can do and figure that all out. But we have until the end of September to figure that out. But they're doing great work over at CCA. I wanted to give them a shout out today. They were gracious enough to spend some time with me. We'll have a little fun with it. And with that, I think we need to go into closed session. In accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, Section 551.072, Real Estate Property Acquisition, and Section 551.087, Economic Development, Deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, we are going to move into closed session. I'll shoulder it. Council, do we have any action to be taken?
Move to adjourn.
I've got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. Council, if you please vote. We are adjourned.